Alright, hey, how's it going? Mike here from LifliesMike. Today we're going to be tying the Kinky Muddler, a Johnny Kings fly. Shout out to Johnny Kings if you haven't checked him out. I'll leave a link to his Instagram down below. But this is one of his patterns that generally uses Slinky fiber, but today we're going to be using EP hair. It's a very good fly. It pushes a lot of water and the action in the tail is fantastic. So let's go ahead and check out the materials and let's get right into it. My trusty pair of Fisker Scissors here. As usual, we're using the Danville 210 denier flat wax nylon. It's always my preferred thread. Now we'll be using some EP fiber. I have some different blends here that I've made. I'm actually going to show you how we blend some angel hair along with the EP fiber, but we're going to be using some EP fiber for the body and some V-ties. Speaking of angel hair, or wind and flash as it's also known, I think they're very similar materials if you ask me. I always consider them to be the same. We'll be using some silver for the belly and some pearl for the top as well. For some simple flash here, we have some crystal flash. It's kind of hard to go wrong with this stuff. You could always use Flashaboo if you like. We have some bucktails here. I have some white bucktail and chartreuse. These are the colors we're going to be tying the fly in, and you can't really go wrong. We're going to be using these as collars underneath the feathers to stop them from fouling. And last but not least, we have some nice saddle hackle here. Really, I like the flat wing sort of style hackle. We're going to be tenting this as opposed to flat wing tying it. Just having them be kind of curve to curve as opposed to side or flat. And these are the Ewing half patches, but whatever sort of thin hackle you can find always works for flat wings. Then we also have some hooks here. I have these SL12S big game hooks. These are probably some of the best hooks around you can use, but any sort of larger shank, wide gap, big game hook works really well for these flies. I have a little bit of super glue. You could use some head cement, whatever sort of adhesives you have, feel free to use. And then last but not least, I also have some E6000, which we're going to be using along with our 3D eyes. I have some nice 3D eyes here. These are 1/4 inch, I believe, but you can feel free to use whatever sort of size eyes you'd like, depending on the size of the fly and the size of the hook. So, first things first, before we start tying the fly, I'm going to show you how to make some custom EP flash blends. It's pretty simple. We're just going to take some EP hair, trim it down, and then blend some angel hair. So you can see here I have some white hair that I already have cut down, but I'm going to show you real quick. Let's take a brand new pack of some EP hair. This is the original EP fibers. And I'm just going to take a small amount here because we really don't need it to be too long. What I can do is cut this down to a couple different sizes. I'm going to take my scissors here and cut this EP fiber. So that way when we V-tie this, we have a little bit of length to it. We can always cut it down if we need. I'll just take a little bit of this, put it aside. And then for instance, this patch here, I'm going to take this and just slightly taper it on the ends. And then I'm going to trim this. Now you can just kind of re-taper it, vice versa. And what we're going to do now, let me put this aside. What we're going to do is we're going to make some blends here. So I figured we should probably use some pearl for the top. So all we need to do is essentially take some angel hair or some wind and flash. And you can cut this. You can also just kind of break it down in your hands. It's very, very light and subtle. And all we're going to do is now take this angel hair, and you can even fold it in between like this, make a little sandwich, right? We're essentially just going to take this and pull on the ends. And we're slowly going to blend the angel hair with the EP fiber, trying to take some angel hair and EP each time. It kind of helps to do this. Try not to rush it and take your time blending it, making sure that you get some even coverage. You can see here we're getting some larger clumps or sections of EP hair. And we can keep restacking this. Now we can always add some more as well. Very simply just kind of break it up here, keeping the length that we want. Trying to make sure, you can always take a look as well. You can always see if we have some sections where there's some hair without flash, we can try and blend that up. Just trying to make sure that we get some even coverage here. That's pretty good. And now I'll go ahead and do this with the other ones. As usual, take our Danville 210 flat wax nylon and just work our way back to the hook point, building up some thread so that we have something so that the material doesn't slip on the hook shank. Now we're ready to start our tail. I'm going to go ahead and take some white bucktail here as usual. Just put a little bit of this down, and this will help give us something to support the hackle that we're going to be tying down. So we'll go ahead and just take this and tie this in. Like so, nice and simple. And now we can take some saddle hackle. We're going to start off with some of this Ewing half patch, this white saddle hackle. And we're just going to start pretty simply. We're going to take two pieces and tie these in tented style. So instead of tying them in flat side to side, we're going to be tying them in at an angle. This is a smaller fly, size 1/0, so we don't need the hackle to be too long. Some nice thin hackle and tie this in. So as opposed to tying this perfectly flat side to side or flat from top and bottom like a flat wing, we're actually going to take this and tie this at a 45-degree angle, and that's what's called tenting the hackle. That's just going to allow the fly to have a little bit more action in the water and have a nice profile to it. So you can see it's not perfectly flat, it's at a nice 45-degree angle. Making sure that we leave some room for the rest of the fly. So again, we'll do the same, and it's good to do a little loose wrap if you like. It's easier to manipulate it, and then you could tie it down with some more force. I'm going to go ahead and tie some chartreuse hackle in here. This time I'm going to make the hackle a little bit longer. Same sort of deal, we're going to be using two nice lawn thin pieces of hackle. And tying them in tented as well. Not perfectly flat. Not flat wing style, but at that 45-degree angle, and just a little bit longer than the last one. Just like so, and we'll repeat this on the other side. And you can change up the size of the head and how much you trim it or how much material put on to also change what sort of bait fish you're trying to imitate, whether you're going for silver sides, mullet, sardinas, or sand eels. You can do this in all sorts of styles. We're going to be going for more of a larger silver side or smaller mullet today. So now that we have our tented hackle, we can go ahead and tie some flash. And go ahead and tie some flash now. I'm just going to take about 4 pieces of crystal flash, 3 or 4. I'm going to fold it in half because it is quite long. And after I trim it, I always like to taper it just a little so we get a more natural appearance, and that'll naturally do it on the bottom as well. And then I can take this and just fold it in half in a loop and tie it right on there. In the same spot that I tied the feathers as well, so we have our tail here. Okay, so now we can go ahead, and this is where the bucktail comes in. We're just going to go ahead and do a traditional bucktail deceiver style collar, top and bottom. This will be a little bit shorter than the hackle, and this is going to help stop the fly from fouling, but also create our natural taper in the fly. So I cut some bucktail off here. I always take the smaller hairs out. Before I do this real quick, I almost forgot, we'll just put a tiny bit of super glue right on the thread just to secure it and make it that much more durable. So what I'll do is I'll take a little bit of bucktail, and I'm just going to tie this in right on the bottom. Not as long as the feathers, probably about 2/3 of the way. So I'll just go ahead and tie this in. We don't want too much, just enough to help create a taper to our body here and fill in the body as well, create a nice natural taper to the fly. So now what we can do is go ahead and take a little bit of chartreuse, and I like tying this, whatever color you have on top, just a little bit longer. So it helps if you have some bucktail that's a little bit longer, and again we're going to take the shorter hairs out of there. So I'll just go ahead and tie this in at the same spot. using my thumbnail here to kind of spread this bucktail around to make sure we cover the white on the belly and the chartreuse up top. All right, now we have our nice natural taper. We can go ahead and start tying our EP fiber in here. Now, I always like to start nice and long, so that first initial piece that we made with that lawner piece, that lawner hair, we're going to cut down to a size we like, and we have our flash pre-blended in there. So traditionally, I like to have the material just be a little bit longer on the first tie. I'd say this is maybe a little longer than I like, so I'm actually going to lengthen it and then cut it again. And then re-taper it. Like so. And now we can go ahead and start our V-ties. Now very simply, I'll show you a V-tie. All we're going to do is tie the material in at an angle, right? We'll go ahead and flip it upside down, do the opposite with our color, with our white color on the bottom, and then we'll go ahead and fold this back in a V shape. And that's essentially all we're doing. But the idea is that the V ties are going opposite top and bottom, and we're ending up building this nice profile. So all we're going to do is move right up to where we finished our last tie, and we're going to go ahead and put a single V tie here. And I just like wrapping it once or twice, nice and tight. And then I'm able to turn that material at an angle. I mean, again, we want this to be even, so you could kind of take a look here and make sure that it's even. And we'll go ahead and flip it upside down. We'll take some of the Lawner white blend that I made here, kind of break that down to a more suitable size, and we'll go ahead and do the same thing here. Thread slipped on me a little, but that's okay. We'll just make sure that we wrap it even top and bottom. So you can see we essentially have like an X here with these two V ties. And now we can go ahead and start folding them back and tying them. So we'll go ahead and take this, and you can see the V tie is like this on top. I'm going to take it and fold it back the opposite way. And then I'm actually going to tie on top back to where our tie, back to where we had our thread wrapped. And now you can see this material sitting in a V shape on top, right? Go ahead and just flip that over and reverse it. Do the same for the bottom. Again, ensuring to wrap it back evenly. And then what you can do is you can go in after and you can kind of pull at the sides a little bit and make sure that the white and the chartreuse is kind of evenly spread top and bottom. And that right there is our V-tie. Very simple. You can use this on a lot of different flies, by the way. It kind of helps too to have a little dog brush, fine wire dog brush here. We can brush this fly out as we go, kind of get a better idea of the profile. Now we will be trimming it as we go, but tapering the material shorter and shorter means that we're going to be trimming less, wasting less material. So as we go, we're going to slowly make the material shorter. Kind of actually more drastically reducing the size as we get closer to the front. We only have a couple of ties, so it's only going to be a couple size changes here. But what I'm going to do now is wrap this back and then just move right up to where I last tied. And this time it's going to be shorter. And go ahead, I'll start with the white here. EP blend, custom blend that we did earlier, put together and tie this in. Again, just doing a couple tight wraps so I can still manipulate it but not build up too much thread. And now we'll take some of this shorter chartreuse EP blend that I have here. And I don't mind if I go a little bit heavier on top, but I try to keep it even, about 50-50, you know. If I am going to go a little bit heavier, I'll try and go on the top as opposed to the bottom so that the fly swims correctly and turns over. And then same idea, we're just going to tie this in. Now, if I had a ton of room here and I was doing a bunch of different ties, I probably would keep the material a little bit sparser, but being that I only have about 2 or 3 ties in front of our first one after the tail, I'm just going to make them pretty robust so we can fill in our profile. Just like in the recent video that we put out with the Squimpish hollow fly, making sure that your ties are even top and bottom so when you fold back the material is pretty important. So make sure you keep an eye on that. And then when we fold the material back, we're going to tie back to where it was originally, the farthest point where our thread goes. Again, trying to keep these ties even top and bottom though. And we'll just go ahead and wrap forward, making sure our material is covering the sides so we don't see any thread. But you can favorite more top and bottom, more on the sides. It's up to you. Again, it depends what sort of profile and what sort of bait fish you're trying to imitate, right? So again, we'll take the brush here and brush this out. It's looking nice. And now we have pretty much one more tie here, so we'll keep it pretty nice and short, but we're going to try and fill it in here. So I'll just go ahead and do one more V-tie on the bottom and top. Get that set up. We'll do one on the top as well. Making sure that we tie them evenly top and bottom. If we need to, we can add a tiny bit just make sure that's even top and bottom, and we'll be ready to wrap this back. Go ahead and throw some whip finishes. Perfect timing too, because that's the end of that spool. Okay, so now we're just going to give it a quick brush. We can go ahead and start trimming it, and then we'll put some eyes on here. It is a good time. We should put some head cement on the thread here to lock that down. Could use super glue as well, but I have the head cement here, so we'll go ahead and use it. Now we can start figuring out the shape of the fly that we want. Now a little trick you can do is you can essentially pinch this between your thumb and your fingers, and you can start trimming the shape that you want. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to pinch it in between my fingers, and I'm just going to use my thumb here as a guide for this natural sort of head. And then I'm just going to follow back while keeping my scissors angled up. So that way if we do trim too much, we're not going to accidentally trim all of our hair. I'm just going to go ahead and flip it again on this side. Now being careful not to strike your scissors against the hook shank so we don't damage it. And now you can essentially just kind of go around and just tilt your scissors upwards and just try and get that shape of the fly better. We want to hit the corners, so that way we don't have a boxy shape, we have a more natural shape to the fly, and we can trim it down if we need to. Again, depending on the sort of size of the fly and the shape that we're going for, right? Making sure we don't have too much material, top or bottom. And again, you can kind of look at it from head on and see, well, if we need to trim the throat here just a little bit more, we can do that. Just like this. But that's pretty good. Try not to get too carried away with trimming it. And that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's put some eyes on there, and then we'll see what it looks like in the swim tank shortly. Okay, we have our nice trimmed body here on this Kinky Muddler with this EP fiber. And what we can do now is we can put some eyes on here. Flash and EP everywhere. We're going to take some E6000, and we're going to take some of our 3D eyes here. Again, I believe these are 1/4 inch. And what we're going to do is, if you saw in the most recent Squimpish video, I show how we take, and I'll show you again here, we're going to take some E6000 and apply it to the back side of the eye and towards the rear half of it, because this will be the back like this. So we're just going to take a small amount, not too much because it will go everywhere, and then we're going to take the eye, lay some of that down, press it, And now because it's on the back half of the eye, we can push the eye down and push it back, and it's going to spread that E6000. And again, kind of push it down and push it in there. We're going to do one more final trim afterwards because the eye pushes some of that material. But you can see now that that eye is going to be nice and secure. And the E6000 works very well in this synthetic material. It really sits in there. There's also the Loctite 3000, I believe it's called. Loctite seal or whatever. There's a couple different sorts of adhesives you can use. But I can get this at the local hardware store and it works really well. So it's not too expensive either. So we'll go ahead and do this on the other side. Again, putting a small amount of glue in there. I always like to take it and touch it as well, spread that glue, and I can always add a little bit more. That way I don't have it squishing out everywhere. And then what I'm going to do is push the eye down and push it back like that. Now it looks like I got a little bit overlap there. So I'll show you what I do if I do end up making a little bit of a mess. I'm actually going to take some of this like parchment type paper, or this wax paper that the eye comes on. So what I do is I just take this parchment or wax paper and I'm just going to essentially scoop it right off the eye there. And that's kind of an easy way to clean it. And then you can also take the material and kind of work it around underneath that eye as well. Make sure we're pushing down on that eye. And we want to make sure it's even. So I'm just going to push that back just like that. And you can see we have our eyes on here, but it's still a little haggard looking, right? It still needs a little bit of a trim here just to tighten it up. All we're going to do to finish this is essentially the same thing we did last time, kind of push down on the material. And then I'm just going to angle my scissors up. And I can come at an angle here on the vise just to make it simple. And I'm just going to clean that up. And you can see how on top there we have a much cleaner profile, right? So again, I'll just flip it. Always keeping the scissors angled upwards and away from the fly, so that way we don't accidentally trim too much. And last but not least, what you can do is come again. You can come over here and just keep your scissors angled outward. Clean up the sides ever so slightly. That white has a little bit too much there. And there we go. Now we have a nice even profile on this fly. All I'm going to do is I always like to let this sit for at least a couple hours. In about 10 to 15 minutes, I'll come back. This glue will have expanded over time and the eyes will have been pushed outwards a little. So we need to push down on that glue because there's just some sort of chemical reaction as it hardens and it pushes outward. So we're going to push the eyes down and I'll wait a couple hours. If not, maybe I'll wait 24 hours usually just to ensure that these eyes set, and then we'll go ahead and throw it in the swim tank.